And I am thrilled to have here in studio with me, for at least the first time with me, State Senator Jack Johnson, our majority leader in the Senate. Mr. Leader, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be with you. Great to meet you in person for the first time. We've talked on the radio several times, but this is the first time in person.
We have. You have been tremendous on getting me up to speed with everything in the legislature, and I did want to give a shout out to your staff. Luke Gustafson has just been Johnny on the spot. It'll be 10 o'clock at night. I'll ask what's going on with this bill, and he will have more than I could have possibly needed. I know you appreciate him, but we do here too.
Oh yeah, Luke has been with me for most of my time in the Senate, and I couldn't do my job without him. He's my right arm, and I tell people he's the brains of my outfit. So he's a very smart guy.
He is fantastic, and what a session!
It's been incredible.
It has been. I mean, for my first one to follow this closely. In bringing it to our listeners, I joked earlier with some of my colleagues from D.C. that I fear I brought the wokeness with me when I came back. I came here to escape that, and it seems that Tennessee, from this administration, has just been constantly under assault, and it's just one thing after another after another. And we've been reporting on WTN all morning about the filing from the Justice Department that challenged Senate Bill 1 that protects our youth here. Was that something that you saw coming this quickly, or was that just an unpleasant surprise last night?
Well, I have to say it's not entirely a surprise. You know, this law that I sponsored, this bill, along with the House Majority Leader, William Lamberth, came as a result of something that was revealed last fall at Vanderbilt University, where they had a specialized clinic to perform these permanent procedures on children that are irreversible based on gender dysphoria. And they're doing this on kids, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old.
And I think a lot of us were shocked.
And the outcry from Tennesseans and certainly members of the General Assembly was overwhelming. So we did, I introduced legislation along with Leader Lamberth to prohibit this, and it's certainly within our purview as a General Assembly. It passed overwhelmingly. It passed bipartisanly, or on a bipartisan basis, and certainly the overwhelming majority of Tennesseans, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, supported this legislation. When you turn 18, Matt, that's one thing. You do what you want to do. But when you're a minor, the state has a compelling interest to protect kids, and that's what we did. And so for the Biden administration, in a typical overreach, in full defiance of the 10th Amendment, state sovereignty, to try to reach down through their Department of Justice, which they have weaponized to such a large degree. It's just yet another example of their overreach to come in and try to thwart the will of the people of Tennessee.
And it's not just Tennessee. I mean, they're going after legislation like this in a number of states. My sense is one of the reasons that they're coming after our legislation was because it was so thoughtful and it was so well written and researched that they know if and when this eventually gets to the Supreme Court, that the constitutional court that we enjoy today, largely because of President Trump's efforts, would uphold the bill.
And I believe that they will. And you're right. And I'm so proud of our Attorney General, who has already responded. I saw his tweet earlier today that he is excited and looks very forward to enthusiastically defending our law. We did work very closely with Attorney General Skrmetti and his office in crafting this legislation, and it's not a complicated subject. Our code is full of laws that define what we refer to as prohibited medical procedures, and that's what this bill did. It said we're not going to do something to a child's body that is irreversible, medicinally or surgically. We will love those kids. We will treat them. We will get them through this difficult time, but we're not going to do something that cannot be undone. It's pretty simple, common sense public policy, in my view.
Yes, it's common sense that sadly today is not all that common.
That's right.
When you're talking about giving a double vasectomy to an 11-year-old girl or chemically castrating a young man, I mean, I have a 12-year-old son, and if someone in his school approached him about this, we'd have issues.
We'd have big issues.
To say the least. You'd probably be bailing me out of somewhere. But I know that our governor is fully committed to fighting this, and just wanted to read the statement that he put out last night where he says, Tennessee is committed to protecting children from permanent life-altering decisions. This is federal overreach at its worst, and we will work with Attorney General Skermetti to push back in court and to stand up for the children. And I am just so thankful that we have the leadership in the governor's office and in the House and with you in the Senate to fight this all the way. And I assume that's the plan.
It is absolutely the plan. And I will tell you on a higher level, Matt, this to me is a great example of what the term you use, federal overreach. The governor used that term. I believe the attorney general's used that term. But to me, it highlights just the radicalism of the left in that this is a hill that they want to die on. This is something that they are willing to take us to court on, to fight us on, to subvert the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty on, in order to undo something that was very, very broadly supported by Tennesseans. And so this is a big battle. This is part of a larger cultural war that we're in with the far radical left. And you were spot on when you said they don't like Tennessee. Why? Because in Tennessee, we're demonstrating every single day that conservative values work, that conservative principles work. We're the least indebted state in the nation. We're the lowest tax state in the nation. We're AAA credit rated. We don't owe a dime on our roads. We are demonstrating every day that conservative principles don't work, and they don't like that, and that's why they are attacking us.
Well, they don't, and Speaker Gingrich was kind enough to be on with us last week, and both of us were just floored by the fact that we were discussing the need. If you'd gone back in time 5 years and said I'd be on the air with him discussing the need to protect women's sports, to protect high school sports, to protect college sports from biological males competing against them. This isn't about being mean to anyone based on decisions that they want to make. It's a basic fairness issue.
Right.
And the Democratic Party has gone all in, and these are Newt's points, not mine, but I wholeheartedly agree with them, that a small section of their party now speaks for the whole party. And I say that based on the fact that the bill federally to protect women's sports passed out of the House without one Democratic vote. And the senator from Hawaii stopped it from moving forward in unanimous consent in the Senate yesterday, basically killing the bill. So the Democratic Party is on record.
They own it.
They have to own this.
That's right.
And as Newt points out, this is an issue that is a 75% issue for us.
Yes.
Most of America is incensed on this.
Yes.
And it's not wrapped up in lifestyle choices or the gay. They try and put everything into one box to kind of protect the narrative, but we see people all throughout that narrative saying we're not on board with this.
Right.
We're not on board with what happened to Riley Gaines. We're just not there. Even people who have been very hesitant to speak out on ESPN saying that destroying Title IX is something that they are going to fight tooth and nail to not have happen.
Well, if there's a silver lining in this larger, what I refer to as a cultural war that we're in right now, is the radical leftist Democrats are exposing themselves. They are showing their true colors. When you see a weaponized Biden Department of Justice coming in trying to overturn a law that we passed, a reasonable common sense law to protect kids, when you see them failing to vote, one single Democrat at the federal level failing to vote to protect women's sports, they're showing their true colors. And so as long as we continue to keep our nose to the grindstone and demonstrate that conservative principles work, and conservative principles are what the overwhelming majority of Americans want, certainly Tennesseans want, we can win this battle. We can win it. We just cannot let our foot off the gas.
Amen. And I'm curious, where do you think this goes from here? So if this killed the bill effectively in the Senate, and having worked in the Senate, I can say that it's not going to be brought up by the party in control and Chuck Schumer. Where do you think it goes from here? Is this all just going to work its way through the courts?
I think so. And relative to the women's sports, we've passed that in Tennessee as well. We've passed it for high school kids, college kids, that biological men cannot compete in women's sports. We've done that at the state level. I don't know if we've been sued over that yet. But then relative to SB1 and the transgender irreversible surgeries on minors, they have asked for an injunction to prevent that law from going into effect on July 1st when it is scheduled to go into effect. We will see how the judge responds and what action the judge takes. But I have full faith and confidence in our Attorney General and his staff, Jonathan Skermetti, to wage a vigorous defense of the legislation we passed.
Yes. And thank you for your leadership on this, and kind of turning the page a little bit, because there was so much done this session that kind of gets overshadowed by some of the national media's narrative. Although I don't want to gloss over the point that I was fairly disgusted as a Tennessean to see a tragedy that unfolded in our community being used by these three knucklehead legislators to get a trip to the White House. And I just want to point out to people that the normal process would have been to either invite the victims of the families to the White House. The normal process would have been to have the police officers that were heroes in putting down the shooter as quickly as they did, which now serves as a national model for mass shootings. He did none of that. He had the three knuckleheads there for a photo op and praised them for disrupting the General Assembly and the rules of the House and the Senate.
Well, I thought it was disgraceful on the part of the Biden administration and these three individuals who basically disrupted the proceedings of the House of Representatives and incited riots and were trying to incite violence. In my view, that's my personal opinion. But you're right. The heroic police officers, the families who tragically lost their loved ones, to me, that would have been far more appropriate for the president, either via an invitation to the White House or when the vice president came to town. It would have been far more appropriate for her to spend time with those than those who wish to disrupt the proceedings of the Tennessee General Assembly.
I can't even go to the vice president. It'll get me too worked up. And we're closing down the hour. But talking about some of it, and it's also worth noting, though, I keep bringing myself back to this, that these three individuals voted against hundreds of millions of dollars for enhanced school safety.
Yes.
So it's not like they can walk and chew gum. They have one issue, and if they don't get their way, let's not sign on to things that would actually prevent this from happening in the future.
Absolutely. Good policy. And you touched on this, and it's disappointing. We really, really had a very good and productive General Assembly, a session of the General Assembly this year. When you look at the money that we did appropriate for school safety, and by the way, there was a comprehensive school safety bill advancing through the General Assembly prior to the tragedy at Covenant. But we made it even stronger, and we funded now school resource officers in every school. We're going to put a state level Homeland Security officer in every county to coordinate and help protect schools, coordinate with local law enforcement, school officials, and so forth. This year we passed the largest tax cut in our state's history, well over almost $500 million tax cut. We prevented our treasurer from investing in ESG or using ESG as a determining factor in investing state assets. $1 billion into our colleges of applied technology, a massive comprehensive transportation bill that's going to help relieve congestion and improve roads all across the state. There was a lot of really good work that got done, and it's a shame that it's being overshadowed by, nonsense from these three Democratic lawmakers.
Well, you touched on something I did want to ask you about and not gloss over, because I think I've gotten a lot of questions from super texters on what the transportation bill does. And as someone who is now driving in more to downtown more than I ever have, what are the plans of the bill? What kind of time frame are we looking at?
Sure. Well, to set the stage, we basically have a $26 billion hole we have to fill. When you add up every road project that is on the list that has been identified as needing to be done in the state of Tennessee, the price tag in today's dollars comes up to about $26 billion. The funding mechanism we have, which is a gas tax that you and I pay every time we fill up our car, generates about $500 million a year to address those new projects. So that's unsustainable. That's a big problem we have to fix. And so the legislation we passed does a number of things. Number one, it immediately appropriates $3.3 billion to accelerate projects that need to be done that are on the books right now. It streamlines the process that you use to build. When you're talking about adding capacity to an interstate, that's a massive, massive deal, and it takes years to get done. But we trimmed out, or we cut out rather, a lot of the bureaucracy involved in that to try to get road projects that might have in the past taken 12 to 15 years to get done, get that down to 5 or 6 years and be able to really streamline getting these big projects done. You probably remember when TDOT redid 440, and that was a massive project, and it got done in about a year and a half. And in years past, that project could have taken 5 years. So we can use some of those tools. And then the final piece of it is to implement what we refer to as choice lanes, which not only will get massive projects done to add capacity to interstates without using tax dollars or taking on debt, but it will also generate an additional funding stream that we can have to use for road projects elsewhere in the state. So a really thoughtful, comprehensive bill that's going to have a huge impact on relieving traffic congestion in urban areas and improving the quality of our roads in rural Tennessee.
Well, that's great. That is great. The traffic is something I'm noticing. The problem of having plenty and living in such a great environment is that everyone is coming here.
Everyone wants to come. Well, the experts say that over the next 20 years or so, we're going to add 1 million people to the greater Middle Tennessee area. And so that's a lot more cars on the road. That's a lot more people out and about. And so we need to be planning. When you look at legislation like this, these are problems you can't fix in a year or 6 months or even 18 months. You really have to be planning out 5, 10 years, even longer down the road. And that's what this legislation does. So I really applaud the governor and our folks at our Department of Transportation and they spend a lot of time looking at other states, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and what they've done in this area. We learned a lot. They told us about things they did right, they did wrong, and so we're able to take some of their best practices and implement those here in Tennessee. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that's great. And as you're kind of getting to wind down in some ways from this session, any plans for you personally in the off time? Anything fun you're going to get to do, or what are your plans?
Well, it's good to be back, spending more time with my wife and being at home more often. The way our system works, we truly are a part-time citizen legislature. We're in session for about 3 to 4 months out of the year, every year. And then we go home. We go back to our families, our jobs, our communities, and live under the laws we pass. And I think the federal government could learn something. I believe our framers intended for the federal government to have more of that model too, but they don't. It's more of a full-time job for them. So yeah, we'll get some downtime and hopefully get to spend some time with the family.
Yeah, and on the federal side, if you haven't gotten done what you've set out to do in 40 or 50 years, it's probably time to give somebody else a try.
Yeah, I agree.
It is. And we're coming to the end of our time, so I want to thank our Majority Leader, Jack Johnson, for being kind with his time and coming and visiting with us in the studio and telling us all the great things that actually came out of this legislative session that we don't get to hear about.